I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hello, AfterBuzzers, and welcome to episode 1. We're talking New France for the new show, Barkskins. Super excited to talk about this show. My name is Kari Lane. I'm joined by my awesome co-host, Rachel.
Hey, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and talk about all the history as well.
Yes. And we have a very special guest in the house. We have Elwood Reid. Welcome.
Hey, thank you guys for having me.
I was like rolling into it because I'm like, oh my goodness, this new show and so exciting. And so you're the showrunner for the show. Please explain what that is, because I feel some people don't quite understand what a showrunner is and what they do.
I mean, it's an all-encompassing term. I mean, it means, I have to say, there's different styles of showrunners for every show. But essentially, it can go as big as a showrunner writes and produces and oversees every aspect of the show, including the writer's room and the production of the show. Or maybe they just write a few episodes and then leave it with their line producer. But I write, produce the show, and oversee most of the aspects of the production. Responsible for hiring, and I think next year if we got another season, I would be directing. I didn't have the time this year. There was no way trying to launch a new show.
Well, you're juggling already many hats, as you just said, so it's quite a few.
Yeah.
Which one actually do you like doing the best?
I mean, it's funny. I like the writing, usually by myself. But I should clarify that I like having written, not writing. The process of writing can be painful. Done. It's very rewarding.
Yeah.
But I love that idea because there's no budget, there's no stars. At that point, anything I think of can go into the stew. So I love that part. But as I've progressed as a showrunner, I really think the single most important, besides the scripts and being on the page, is being up there producing. Because I don't understand the showrunners that don't go to set. I have some friends that don't do that, but for someone like me, especially in a first-year show, how that script gets translated by both the actors, the director, and all of your production department heads is extremely important. And particularly a show like this, you mentioned history in the beginning. There were so many things to get wrong, not get right. And when you're working for Nat Geo, I felt that burden doubled. Like I couldn't have, I didn't want to have someone coming in with like a modern axe, or I tried to be, the guns were period correct. I tried to have everything as period correct as possible. And things slip through the cracks. I mean, like I'm sure everyone's famously talked about the water bottle on Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Or the Cooke can.
Yeah, that's the biggest show on TV, and there was millions of people watching that show, and yet that got through. So it's my fault if it goes wrong, and you don't get much credit if it goes right. No one sees the sweat. So that's the job of a showrunner.
Now, my question is, based off what you were saying, we all know this is based off the 2016 novel of the same name. Did you find yourself referencing the novel and trying to be true to the novel, or was this just supposed to be more of a basis of the novel and that as your starting point?
That's a good question. I should say this: Annie Proulx is an author. I'm a novelist and short story writer. I've published 4 books. I have another one I'm almost done with. She's a writer who meant an immense amount to me as a writer. So when I got offered, to adapt her book, I paid attention. But that being said, having my own books adapted and having adapted other people's books, adaptation's a tricky art because, the novel's 700 pages long. I took the first 100 pages, the characters that were in the first 150 pages, because she travels 300 years in her narrative. There's no way I could do that in TV. I'd love to have these fantasies of every episode was a different, decade or something like that. It was impossible to produce. That's where the showrunning producing comes in. So, but that being said, the novel, there's a couple of lines of dialogue that are lifted directly from the novel. So I felt that was really important to sort of put those lines of dialogue in there. And there's some characters that come from the novel, but then I had to invent some other stuff to go with it, just to kind of carry the plot narrative, because Annie Proulx did not intend to spend a whole season's worth of storytelling in those first 100 pages. She was moving through time. So for TV, I had to slow down a little bit, set some scenes, set some characters, set some motivation. So I had to add a lot more character and plot than I thought I would have to normally.
It is interesting though, because I started reading the book and I did feel as I was going through the first couple of chapters that there were a lot, like it did feel like we were starting to meet the same people. And I did feel like watching the first episode of Barkskins was very faithful. Like it felt
Good.
like they felt like they were the same tone.
Well, that's really smart because, the job of an adaptation is not to recreate the book. In my opinion, when you love a book, it's the perfect art form. It's like falling into this movie in your head, and it's immersive in the best way. You're never going to recreate that in a TV show. There's too much of a distance. And so I think the best adaptations get at that tone or that kernel of thing that makes a book special, and they riff on it, or they expand on it, or they take an element that wasn't an A melody line, a B melody line, and make it the A. So I mean, that's the art adaptation, and everyone's different. I've adapted lots of different stuff, and you pick and choose your path. But in this, I just knew that again, I felt burdened by Annie because she's a writer that means so much to me, and I know she's very, very popular author. She's won the Pulitzer, I think it was a Pulitzer Prize she's won. But I just felt that burden. Like I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to piss people off. So I took in the beginning of the book that really exciting opening with those characters and just expanded on that. And then in future seasons, there's a lot of book left. We could go into that if we had to. But it was like a scalpel. I went in there with a scalpel and then forgot about the book and then expanded on it. That's the adaptation job.
Did you know going in that you wanted to cover X amount of pages per the limited miniseries kind of run of the 8 episodes?
No, I mean, it's funny. As I've gotten older, I don't know anything. And that I'm always looking to seek that jumping out of a plane feeling, because when I'm handed something like a book or a TV project or whatever it is, and I know what it is, and it's boring to me. So I did not know. I was scared when I first read the book. I just didn't know, where to go with it. And that fear, what I did know is I wanted to do it. So I called up the producers right away and I said, I can do this. Total bullshit. Do you know what I mean? But that's how good stuff comes. Because then I was like, okay, you got the job. Now you have to.
Yeah.
So I always, as I've gotten older, I look for that fear factor a little bit. I think that's when good stuff comes. Look, there's stuff that comes very easy to me very naturally, and I have a tendency to avoid that when I'm picking projects. And this was the Wrangler 700-page environmental novel that covers multiple generations and 300 plus years. You have to figure out a way to wrestle that bear down to the ground and extract something good from it. And that was the job.
Now, speaking of extracting something good from it, what was it about this story, this book, that made you want to tell it now?
Well, when you're looking for projects, I mean, again, this sounds crazy. There are no shows set in this setting. There's no shows set in this time period. So that by itself, it felt like I've done a lot of cop shows. You've done all, that felt unique and fresh, And so then my challenge became, okay, you're doing a period, quote, costume drama show. And I think there's a lot of baggage that goes with those things. It's everyone's going to meet at the ball, and there's going to be all these sort of like a lot of people in well-paneled rooms talking, and there's always a horse with a carriage running through. And I was like, I wanted to blow that up a little bit, because I feel like, I wanted to add a little bit of sort of more plot, a little more violence, a little more incident, and because that period of time is incredibly bloody, incredibly exciting, and incredibly jam-packed. So, the challenge of that was just sort of like, how do I take a period piece and breathe a little life into it? Because I love period shows. I watched Belgravia. I've watched Downton Abbey. I love period shows that do something fresh, sort of like Peaky Blinders. It just feels, it updates that. And I didn't see that stuff out there. So whenever you're looking for a project like that, and you go, okay, well, I get to have, people in the woods with axes. I get to have the French and the English trying to kill each other. I get to have the Native Americans trying to figure out which side to go on. And there was a lot of just juicy sort of plot and history that was already there. So I just got more excited the more research I did.
What's so interesting about it is a lot of times, like, we have a ton of information on the French Revolution and the events leading to that. What we usually don't see so much are the events leading to the French and Indian War,
Yeah.
which is paramount. So I love the fact that we're getting this set in this time period. It's so interesting to me seeing all of these things brought to life in a show, and seeing these two characters, just seeing, I think instead of seeing it from the British perspective, seeing it from the French perspective as
Mhm.
well. I thought that was such a fresh take.
Well, it's funny because we get a lot of, if you're talking about period pieces, you get a lot of the settlement of the West, right? And you got to remember when the West was settled, our West, the United States West, there had been civilization for 100 plus years on the East. This is the first English and European settlement coming down the St. Lawrence Seaway. Now, Quebec City is the oldest city in North America. And when you go up there, you feel it. And I think why you say that is because it seems more part of Canadian history, but it's really the story of North America. And it's really the story of how our civilization was founded. And right there, when you look, there's this little sort of jar of characters, the French, the English, the different companies that they're trying to take, all the different, I mean, dozens and dozens of Indian tribes, and little tiny place with severe weather, harsh seasons, and very hard place to survive. You automatically have great story just coming from that. So again, it felt like a no-brainer. I was like, how come no one had done this before?
Now, was it important to you? And then was there anyone who was a Native American involved with the writer's room or concepts at the early stages?
Well, very early on, I have a friend named David Troyer. He's a Ojibwe writer from Minnesota, and he wrote a book called The Heartbreak of Wounded. He's a novelist, but he's just recently written a book called The Heartbreak of Wounded Knee. I got him on as a tech advisor. I brought him to the room the first day. And the best thing that David did too was he told me I had to hire this writer. And he couldn't, he gave me this name. I could barely pronounce the name. His name is Migazi Ponceneau. And he's like, you just got to hire this guy. That's what you got to do. Migazi is a member of the 1491 theater troupe, which is some indigenous actors. They have this theater group that sort of is, they do modern updating of sort of historical events. Migazi was in the room from the beginning. And so early on, a large part of the conversation was, and again, I'm paraphrasing. I said to Migazi, I was like, what is it that pisses you off the way that Native Americans have been portrayed? And the first thing he said was, and I noticed because I had fallen into this too, is he goes, I don't want to do chief speak. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, every movie you see, all the Indians talk very slowly, as if they, many moons ago, that sort of thing, right? And he's like, they talk just like everybody else. They spoke French, they spoke English, the English spoke their language. And he goes, so this idea that they are somehow different by the cadence of their language. So that was something he worked really hard with me on, was sort of modernizing or updating the way we depicted the Native Americans. And then also depicting the different factional tribes that were there. Each one of them was this, I think it's the fault of Western, Westerns as a genre, and our Western thought is that we think of the Indians as a monoculture. It's just one thing. They're all the same. And again, Migazi was very, very sort of insistent on viewing each one of these tribes wanting something different.
Which kind of leads into a little bit of our beginning of the episode of, we see a village or a home under attack, and it gets later mentioned a specific group of natives did that. But then we have another character, Yvon, who points out he's a little suspicious on that.
Yeah.
Rachel, what did you think of, this is how we're starting off the episode. We have a girl who's on the run. We have this attack. It kind of does set up this brutal tone at the start. What did you think of that opening, Rachel?
Well, first of all, the graphics, that first entry into the world, they even say on the first page of the book, the way that she describes the forest, I feel like we, like, right off the bat, got a really clear image of how intimidating the forest itself can be, just with how massive it is. And so that was an amazing image to jumpstart in, and to understand what some of the conflict is going to be right up front. We got that with seeing, what was happening between the native peoples and the settlers who were there.
Nice. Was this for you, Elwood, something at the beginning of the book that you're like, oh, we need to have this be the start of the episode, or was it a way to set the tone for the show?
Are you saying are you talking about the tree in particular, that very graphic image of the tree?
Oh, no, just the very opening kind of scene is the...
Oh, well, no, I mean, it was massively important. And it's funny, it was in the scripts. You talk about going back to the scripts.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote, usually you're writing scripts, right? A boat comes down the water through a woods, period, right? Then the dialogue starts. I spent paragraphs describing the woods, the density of them, how they went forever, the bugs, the mud, what was out there. And then I spent a lot of time in the script also describing what it was like for these people to live out there. Once they stepped outside the walls of that village, there was wild animals. They believed there were spirits that were walking out there. There were English that would kill them. There were, crazy trappers. It was just, it's hard to understand how threatening it would have seemed back then, because when it was dark, it was dark. So I spent a lot of time in the script and then also in the production of showing that vast woods. And one of the big advantages we had as my production designer, this woman named Isabel Guy, she was very insistent on us shooting up in the woods where the story took place. So I didn't have to fake any of that. When that opening, when I put the camera, that's real. That's just woods. There's nothing there. So I think that gives you authenticity to this, just the scale and scope of this wilderness these folks were living in. That was very important. And the actors, I know when they first went to set, they're like, holy shit, we're in the woods. There's not a hospital or a McDonald's over behind the camera. We're in the middle of nowhere. And that really set a tone from day one.
Did you all set up a base camp in the woods, or was everybody trucked in and trucked out?
It depends. We had built, the sets drive could anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. One time, the opening set that you're talking about, that was probably almost an hour drive up into this mountain preserve to get to that top up there where you see that water coming in. And there was no cell service, nothing up there. Again, it created this authenticity. My director David Slade and everybody, you just felt like you were in it. And the actors, I could see it. I can even see it on screen right now. I can see when they're looking, they're not faking looking at trees. They're looking at an ocean of.
Now, are you
massive?
Oh, yes. Are you the one who actually picks the locations, or is that like a group of people who decide that, hey, we're going to go into this area that's very secluded, here's the spot?
Well, it's funny. Again, it's showrunner. Some showrunners, I picked everything, but I also had like I said, as production designer and a location manager. Once they understood what I wanted, everything they brought me, it was very easy for me to pick it. I said yes, because she didn't take any shortcuts. Every single thing was, I know this is a pain in the ass. We got to drive an hour up this mountain road through this dirt and then haul the gear down a cliffside, but it'll be worth it. And she was right. So I really, trusted her sense of location. But yeah, I spent a lot of time driving around the woods. We looked at shooting in Toronto, shooting in Halifax, shooting in Vancouver. And it just kept coming back to this thing. I think that's something that you said early on, which is we wanted to be where the history happened. Because when you're up there, you feel it. When you walk, you feel it. The people that were working on my show, they were from Quebec. Their relatives going back a couple hundred years. Some of them had died in the woods, had been Jesuits, had been Fidois, had been killed by Indians or British. This was living history to them. And you walk, and the tribes were still there. Many of the tribes were still there on reservations. And so you felt it being there. It was very important for me to immerse everybody there.
Well, you do get immersed right away in the show, for sure. We get to meet our two first kind of characters that feel like maybe they're going to be start of our narrative. Rene Selle and Charles Duquet. Yes. Rachel, what do you think of these two I guess they're still criminals, but ex-criminals from France that have now been sent to the New World of their indentured servitude for, it's only 3 years if you survive, and then it's going to be fine.
Yeah, Duquet, I wasn't so sure he would actually survive. And I actually felt really bad for him. And especially thinking about Paris, that versus where they're at now, I just kept seeing in my head the difference. Like, even though this is 1700s, Paris as a city was still a very established city compared to where they were. And this, I feel this poor guy has no idea how to survive. So I'm very scared for him.
Yeah. I these I think it's interesting too when it's actor choice, and I wonder if it's as much too when you read it. But yeah, I felt bad for Charles that I was like, oh, I don't know if this guy is gonna make it. And I understand his unhappiness with the situation, but I was just like, okay, dude, come on. I'm a bit more with Rene of, all right, this is a chance to do something. But Charles points out, like, hey, it wasn't your father and your father before their father before him. They worked, but apparently you're still in the same situation. But I don't know. I feel Renee's still a little more of an optimist of where they are and what opportunities could happen for them.
Well, it's
Well, I
interesting.
mean, not to spoil anything, but hold on to that feeling you have for Duquet
Okay.
feeling hard for him, because you'll soon abandon that. I mean, he's
Okay.
he learns some things. He's a quick learner.
I do. Well, we learned later with him and Marie actually. Well, when they're in the woods with that, that was an interesting scene. And actually, I question what they mentioned. There's something wrong with the meat, but I didn't quite know what that word was. Rachel, did you catch what was wrong with the ram of why? I was trying to find. Yeah, they said strandu.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I caught the word. I wasn't sure what that meant either.
I was gonna say,
It's,
Elwood,
I mean,
are we supposed to know yet, or?
well, I mean, it's funny you guys pick on that, because there was this thread. There was another scene that's missing from the pilot that at the end, which I won't give away, when the priest is screaming, he sees something in the woods, and I actually had planned to show that. We had to cut it. It didn't seem it pulled you out of the show a little bit. But one of the things, again, in my reading, Strendu was this demonic spirit that the natives believed inhabited that area. Everybody there carried their folklore with them. They were afraid of the dark. I mean, they thought that devils and demons walked in the woods. And you got to remember, part of the journey from the old European world to the New World, one of the reasons the church was so set on sending priests and nuns there was because they viewed all these souls that had to be captured for God, and they believed that in the New World that demons walked the land that had not walked in Europe in many years ago. So there's all these mishmash of superstitions, and that was a theme that was a little bit buried. And I think, as the writing goes on, what you see in the show is that man is just as bad as any of these sort of evil spirits that are out there. You get to see how venal and violent man can be, but they had this fear. And I think one of the things I was trying to get at in the script and get in the show is like how much fear drives you to do things, how much fear drives you to survive, how much fear drives you to be a coward in Charles Duquet's case. In some ways, like he's so fearful, and he learns to master that fear as the show goes on. But it's that sense that you walked into the woods, and they believe there was a very thin line between the physical world and the spirit world. So that was just something. It was. I'm glad you picked up on that, because it was really important to me in the script. It was just, I just left it there. If you want to find it, it's there. If not, don't worry about it.
Well, then the way you're putting that does make me curious on if the show would address the supernatural because A, it really exists, or B, because these characters believe it really exists.
Well, I mean, I would argue that they're the same thing. That's
Okay.
the same. That belief. I mean, like, to this day, people believe things that we know are not true, and so but they take action based on these erroneous beliefs. So it was just this idea, and I was fascinated because I was just reading like how much of their superstition and folklore these people took from the old country to this new country. And remember, everybody on that boat, they had been, like you said, in Paris, a pretty sophisticated city. They got on a boat having no knowledge online and Google. Like they had no idea. They had heard that there were savages living in the woods. They had heard that the forest went on for, no one had ever explored the end of the forest. So it's almost like going to like a fantasy world for these people. When they arrive, I can't imagine when you see the filles de roi, the young women that are coming over there. They're coming over there simply because their families or their less fortunate girls who have no land at all to try to get land. This is all about land. And so, I just can't imagine, how scary that would have been with all the superstitions that existed back then. So I was that was a I'm glad you picked up. That was a theme I spent a lot of times just sort of working and then kind of like bearing a little bit.
Well, it's interesting too, speaking of superstitions, because the book, before you even get into the actual novel, there's a quote regarding antiquity and how the native people were more willing to preserve the actual trees and plants because they believed in spirits inhabiting these inhabiting everything. And so when the settlers showed up, it's just so interesting that that quote, it basically said that they didn't have any regard for the trees any longer because they no longer had these superstitions about everything having a soul.
Well, I mean, again, just in my reading, it was interesting to see the clash of cultures there, because the natives they were the much more technologically advanced civilization. They knew how to live there, they knew how to survive there, they knew how to thrive there. And then the British had a much more, they were working their way up from the Great Lakes and from the colonies. They had a much more rapacious view of North America. They didn't have any plans on settling it and trying to recreate England there or United Kingdom. They were there for the resources. The French really did want to try to form French society in woods. Ultimately, the Brits battle, and the French hold on to that little piece there. But it was just really interesting, to sort of clash of these three different dynamics coming together along this really rich, wild, river that and all these different sort of competing factions. That was, just getting at the heart of that. And again, I think it's history we just don't know. I mean, how, a couple things had gone different, all of Canada would have been French speaking. It's just different. It was a very interesting period of history for me. And it was so big. And like you said, no one has really explored this.
Now, speaking of the recreating the world they came from, those two other characters lead us to Claude Trepagny, which is a very fun character, and his idea of, oh yes, we're going to rebuild it, we're going to have this space, his Duma and everything. Rachel, what did you think of this character and this new interaction that he has, and that his wife is native and mixed with Canadian or French and native?
Well, first of all, I love how realistic it is. That is something that absolutely would have happened. And you don't really see that portrayed completely this way. And so I loved the representation. I loved the accuracy of it. And also, I have to say that I loved David Thewlis. I believe I said his name correctly. I loved seeing him in this role. I thought he brought so much life to it. And so, yeah, and at first I didn't know how to take him, if he was going to be more on the bad side or the good side. But to me, the way I'm reading him now is that he's kind of a gray area character. Generally good, but might do some questionable things.
I feel you on that one. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because that character was one of the things I got from Annie that wasn't in the book. She said that, because I asked her, I was like, what is this guy going on about God and his dome and all this stuff? I couldn't figure out what the hell he wanted. There's also, you forget about North America, a lot of dreamers and a lot of religious people came here to try to found like a perfect civilization in Eden. And so that was him. And she had said that in the book, she'd intended him to be a Cathar, which was a persecuted sect that was during the Inquisitions that was eradicated from the Catholic faith. They were heretical sect. They believed in a divided soul that, people had both good and bad in them, that God was both good and bad. And this was a heretical idea. And again, I just wanted to have this, as you said, the two characters you mentioned, Sel and Duquet, they're scared, they're coming there. I wanted them to meet, a wild man that was just embracing the wildness of the dome and have this heat of vision. They're people, that's how civilizations are carved out. People have a vision. They go there and go, I'm going to make a city here. I'm going to make, make my fortune here. And it takes that craziness. And I do like that you didn't feel like he was good or bad. That was intentional.
I feel he's very eclectic, and I want to see more from him as well. A character that I do think is probably more on the bad side, we have Lafarge, and him, I'm like, a bit more suspect. And that he works for Mr. Cooke. And Mr. Cooke, I was also like, I feel this is going to be someone who presents as a good person, but has somebody else do the bad things on the DL so that people don't see that happening and not connected to it. Rachel, what are your suspicions, or do you have any on these characters and the arrangements they have?
Yeah, I think that's where we're gonna see some trouble, and especially with Mathilde, because I do not think she's bad, but I think they're going to put her in a really hard place. That's gonna just make it give her a tough time. I thought that the performance of I believe the father, I believe he was the man who basically stepped up
Francis
and
Gifford.
yeah, I thought that performance was dead on. The way that he commanded the room and took control of the scene.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. The husband to Mathilde, or which character?
No, you know what? If you want to keep going, let me look him up really fast so I make sure I have the right name.
I also really liked Mathilde, and I also liked her relationship with her husband Francis, and thought there's also something going on mysterious. I love the why it's the rose suite. I thought that was really sweet and touching, and also very realistic. Of plenty of people lost children along the way that lose many family members. It's hard to survive, but I think go ahead. Yes.
Hamish Goames.
Yes, Hamish.
Yeah, Hamish.
Yes, he's very interesting character. So what were you saying? You were saying how he commanded the room, and
how he commanded the room, but how he demanded respect for someone who was not French, who was a native person. And I was like, yeah, thank you, because it was just very it was very powerful. Just the way that he didn't even have to say a lot, but everything he said was like he just took control and was able to kind of win the power in the scene.
Yeah, he says my equal and treated as such, which I thought was a great moment. That I'm like, oh, this character is very interesting. He is no nonsense whatsoever, which I do like that Mathilde, she sees that right away and tells her husband, like, stop playing games. They don't have time for this. Which also I think insane, playing games in front of these people is like, I mean, tell your husband secretly, because it's like, wait, why are you playing games? But I like that she's more the level-headed one of, these people mean business. We need to be more straightforward with them. And I think Hamish has a lot of mystery about him that I'm very curious about. And he is very laser focused on this missing person that they're going after, the Randall Cross, which is very interesting.
Yeah. And also, Elwood, you had mentioned religion, and the fact that, like you said, a lot of people don't remember that a lot of people in Europe were being persecuted for their religious beliefs. And so they were escaping and trying to rebuild in North America. And just the fact that we get to see what religion looks like right now in this series, I think is so, it's fascinating to see how, we have the mother and just different people who kind of believe in different things kind of coming together in this world.
Yeah, I mean, when you do any reading of it, like, again, this speaks to the bravery of some of these people. It's like the Catholic Church was basically funding their expansion in the New World by sending nuns and priests out to make contact with these tribes and try to teach them. They would teach them English, then they try to teach them the catechism and the Bible and stuff like that. And they would also heal them and, and look after them, and vice versa. And, a lot of those priests also died because a lot of the tribes didn't want to be contacted and wanted nothing to do with them. So it was a really interesting period of time. And you just look at the sheer numbers of those people that were sent over here by the church. Again, young 17, 18-year-old priests. And what happened to them. Some walked into the woods and never were heard from again. So again, it just is this idea that everyone's coming there for something. And some people are being sent there. And you brought up Hamish Goames. He's not in the book. He was the investigative, character. He's the blade. He's the guy that's going to come in and start asking the questions. And he's got many secrets of his own, which we'll find later in the season. But I wanted somebody like that. And I like that you picked up that he's no nonsense. He's mysterious, and a lot of it had to do with the actor, the wardrobe, and it made him look like a vampire, and he's this very sort of striking character when he comes in, and the relationship between these two, between Yvon, who is his you would think is like his translator, but they're actually equals. They were equal standing in the company. They were company men that were, that we think are being sent there to find this missing guy. We learn that's not quite the truth.
I think there is definitely more going on there and why this person went missing, but we'll save that for our predictions. We had mentioned the nun, and then we meet the women who had been sent over. I think one of them is Melissande, and is it Delphine? Is the two that were hanging out? Yeah,
Yep.
I thought their interaction was very interesting, and like, well, if you have no opportunities at home, you get sent over. Like, what are you looking for a husband? And I like that Melissande's very like, I want a rich man because it'll make me comfortable. Which, yes, I follow the logic, but it's like that's. I think Delphine has a better idea of like, I want him to be kind, but they have their test for intactness. But for me watching, I like that the nun had the vial of lamb's blood and was sympathetic to these women because she could have been the other way and been like, well, it sucks for you and expose them. But it's like, no, it's okay. I understand. Like, here, I want you to succeed in life. So yeah. I thought that was a pleasant surprise. Rachel, what did you think of these ladies and that whole interaction?
I was very shocked when the mother gave her the lamb's blood and actually said, this is how we're going to handle this. She seemed very like hyper strict, and that she would have been someone to turn in a young person who admits that they've not only had sex already, but she was pregnant. And so this is, back then, this was this would ruin a young girl's chance for a husband. So the fact that the mother would turn around and say, it's okay, we're going to take care of this and just hide what I've seen, I thought was very commendable and, beyond her time.
Well, that does make me have to ask, Elwood, is this how it is in the book, or was this a more modern addition?
Well, the Melissande character was in the book, but she was brought over as a wife from France. I was fascinated by the Filles du Roi, which is a program that the king. There was women. Another way to look at the settlement in North America is women were a scarce resource. The only way you could hold on to the land was to get families there that could women could have children, and then they could pass the land on through generation to generation. This Filles du Roi program was really fascinating because a lot of these people that were coming there, unlike the men as much, some of them were street urchin girls from Paris. Some of them may have been prostitutes. Some of them may have been fourth or fifth daughters. Never going to get land. We're never going to even be married to anybody with land. Because you remember back in the period of time in the European history then, women did not get to choose who they got to marry. The really interesting thing about the Filles du Roi is they got to choose. So they bought this ticket. They took this ticket and said, I'm going to get on a boat. Imagine a family sending their 15-year-old daughter, 16-year-old daughter across the ocean. You're never going to see her again. With the hopes that she can marry somebody that's going to get land, and your family could have land. And some of these families, hundreds of years, have never had land. They'll never be the aristocracy. They'll never make it up into the upper crust of society. So these women took an incredible chance. And the women, the nuns that were there, they wanted these women to be passed off to these men so they could marry and have children and populate the world and fulfill God's notion of having children. So, Mother Sabrine's, she's strict, but she's also a realist. And she's like, what are you going to do? I can't send you back. Do you know what I mean? And she's been around the world. And you learn later in some other episodes that she isn't your typical mother. She's got a little history too. She's been around the block.
But that probably makes her a more interesting and dynamic character, because otherwise it'd be like, oh, it's just who we suspect and everything. So
yeah, no, you think the nun, and that's the easy knee-jerk thing to go to, you know.
So the other kind of thing that's going on that I'm a little bit suspicious about. So we have the captain talking with Hamish as well, and trying to get the truth, and that the Iroquois are well managed. I don't think they are, and I think that's awful. They're like, yes, we've managed them. I I think there's definitely a lot going on here. Rachel, were you picking up anything on the managing of other groups, of more than one? Because it might be also the French against the British as well.
Yeah, I think that they were overestimating as in the French settlers' ability to help to keep themselves safe. And I just don't see this going very well for them. I also found it quite interesting when we have the scene where they discover the woman at the beginning of the episode who we saw running and ran up to a tree. And then we had, that moment where we see animals attacking a body on a tree. I was like, wow, this is it was very interesting, disturbing, but in an interesting kind of way. And just I liked that we had that tie back to the beginning.
I thought it was going to be the same girl, and I'm like, wait a minute, some other girl climbed a tree too? But I mean, sure. And so we see the other one at the end. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, you figure if one girl was climbing a tree, there had to be other people thinking the same, having the same like rational thoughts. So
Sure.
yeah, but yeah, fake out for sure.
Yeah. And then we get the very end, we have this, strange man, this weird grave, and Hamish and Yvon are there trying to figure out what's really going on. But we don't get that information just yet, and that's where the episode leaves off. Were there any other moments in the episode, Rachel, that stood out to you?
The big one was the moment with the mother and Melissande, where we saw the mother. I read it as, well, the other big thing was when Melissandre, we see that at first she was a little bit like feisty to as far as she could be without kind of crossing the limit. And now she seems to have a lot more respect for the mother. So that really stood out to me. And just that man at the end, when he was standing over the body, my thought was that he was just so shocked and so much trauma from what he had gone through. We can only imagine that that's the state that he's left in, was the state of just shock and, disarray.
Do we know if Hamish and Yvon know what Randall Cross looks like?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll learn, and it becomes an important story point, that Cross is his brother-in-law.
Okay. I had that man at the end. I'm like, wait, maybe that could be him if they don't know what that man looks like. But I have a feeling they knew this person, and that's why they're trying so hard to find him.
He's a priest. He's praying over this grave, and so the mystery becomes what was a priest and what was this little girl? How did they get out? One was killed, and that's a mystery that kind of resonates through a couple episodes in the series.
Very cool. And we get this mystery dog that maybe was something else, and that little sprinkling of supernatural, which I do like a lot. Because it is from the perspective of the people of like, is it really or is it not? And is it just in their head or is it really there? It's that nice like toeing the line of it. So nice. Rachel, any other thoughts before we get into some predictions and our special segment?
I don't have any other thoughts.
All right, we're gonna do hold on our predictions. We're gonna do our special segment where we're looking at the real history of it all. And how accurate is it? Rachel's reading the book and going to give us a little bit of like how much are we following? So Rachel, take it away.
Yeah, so I think that we touched on a lot of the historical pieces of the book and the show. I think I'll just say that from beginning the book, the major difference I noticed is that we actually start with Rene arriving. Obviously, we don't have that prologue where we see the people running. So I'll just kind of say that was a difference. But I actually really loved that the show handled it differently because we got more of a sense of the threat. Not that the book was not amazing, because so far it's super interesting as well. But it's great to see, that in a show we have that hint of the conflict to come based on that opening scene. The other thing I just wanted to mention, and this is a little bit different than what we're going to do on the special segment, but there's also, for anyone who's interested in reading, there is an article from on the Middleist Daily, and it's discussing how Barkskins is breaking the mold on Native representation, and how, like you were talking about, Elwood, even in the mannerisms and how people speak on the show, is they're changing the way that we perceive language during that time period. And so if anyone who's interested, you can find that article online on the Middleist Daily discussing that.
Nice. Something I noticed in that article too is, I'm going to probably say her name wrong, but Kanehito Horn.
You can call her Dio. Dio. You just call the T is pronounced D in the Mohawk language.
Oh.
So you can say, and her name is just Dio. I call her Dio.
Oh, nice. I liked that she's in the article as well, talking about how she actually is mixed race as well, and liked that she got to play that in the show, because she's sometimes what Hollywood doesn't see is like you're ethnically more than one race, because she's Native American and I didn't look at what I don't recall what the other.
She's Mohawk. She's from the Mohawk tribe. Her mother is actually a fairly famous Mohawk activist. And she was born and raised on the Mohawk reservation. So, yes, she is of mixed, heritage, but like she grew up in the Mohawk reservation. Yeah. She speaks Mohawk. She was a huge asset to me getting actors. I got a lot of actors from the Mohawk reservation to come up and play Iroquois. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
I really like her character. I liked her on previous shows as well. So I was like, ooh, I like that. That is a authenticity that's in her real life and into the show as well. Let's do some quick predictions. Rachel, anything that's jumping out at you prediction-wise?
I think we're going to get some more answers in the next episode in terms of what's going on with Cross. Obviously, we're not done with Hamish. And I think that Melissande is going to get a husband pretty quickly, and that something might go wrong with this lamb's blood, and something that she doesn't want coming out will come out.
Ooh, I like that prediction. I am very suspect of Mr. Cooke and Lafarge, and I feel some of their secret dealings is not going to go as well. And as you were kind of saying with Mathilde, that I also think something's going to clash there as well. It's with the captain too, of I don't know if they're kind of secretly hiding what's really going on. Like, I feel there's something else bigger and they're killing people off. Like, this is some other side plot that I'm like, I don't know, but I feel there's something going on there and we don't know what it is. So I'm really curious to see how it unfolds in the upcoming episodes. And I bet, Elwood, you're sitting there poker face and like, Nice. And then, Elwood, actually, speaking of that, is there anything else you'd like to share with viewers for what they can look forward to for the rest of the season, or anything you'd like to tease or say about the show?
Well, I'm going to touch on riff a little bit. I mean, you're not incorrect to suspect that a lot of stuff is going to get out. These are people with axes and guns in the woods. And there's a lot of, I think it's a line in the pilot, like that people don't build their fortunes and their wealth by being good people. A lot of, and if you look, I mean, it's the history of North America. It's a history of capitalism. And again, it was something that was in the show, which is all great capitals or civilizations were built on the blood of the have-nots. And they were built on the sort of, I think it's Annie Proust's thesis statement is it's basically the rape of the land. They were exhausting resource after resource after resource, and the people were a resource in that sense. And so the people that were the indentured servants like Duke and Sell, they were just cannon fodder to come there and build this land. And so, that's one of the things that the book takes to the 10th degree, and I certainly do in the show. Like I believe me, a lot goes on in 8 episodes.
Looking forward to seeing it unfold. Well, also the other great thing with 8 episodes is you can pack a lot of information, but not make it feel like you're drawing it out or having filler episodes. It's a more focused story rather than, all over the place.
What was originally intended to be 10 episodes, but because of the weather, I had to shrink it to 8. So it was like, there's a lot of compression in the storytelling right now. You'll see each episode advances the story quite a bit.
Nice. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Rachel, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, just that, I'm gonna keep reading the book as I watch along. So I'm gonna be super, I'm just gonna be paying attention to the differences and how things are done different. Yeah, I'm just gonna be comparing it in like a good way.
Yay! You'll be our history and book expert.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for Elwood for talking with us and sharing behind the scenes and your process and your involvement with the show. Is super fun to hear those details that only you could share.
Well, it's likewise. It's interesting to see real-time reactions to the show and where you think things are going. As a writer, it's very illuminating to because I don't get to talk to people. Just everyone's involved in the show that I talk to, so it's interesting to hear what you guys think could happen and the details that you pick up. But great questions, and especially picking up some of the supernatural elements that were woven into the plot.
Cool. Well, thank you. And, you're going to have more people wanting to talk with you since this show is coming out. Where can people find you online?
I keep I'm on Instagram and I have a Twitter that I've been sort of posting some photographs from the show. I took a lot of moody, weird, behind the scenes, black and white photos when I was there.
Cool.
So I spent most of my time writing and not much time online, to be honest.
Well, you have a couple ways that people can now follow along and see some more behind the scenes stuff, which is really enjoyable too for fans. Rachel, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Rach Goodman or on my author Instagram account at Rachel Radner Author.
Nice. And you can find me online at Kari D. Lane. That's KARIDLANE. And if you like sci-fi and a little bit more on the quirky side, you can go check out the Vagrant Queen after show. That's Sundays at 3 p.m. And if you're an anime fan, we're doing Demon Slayer at 6 p.m. on Sundays as well. Again, Elwood, thank you so much for talking with us. And everybody, thank you for watching. Comment down below what you thought on this episode, and we'll be excited to cover more.
Thank you.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.